Welcome to the School of Wedding Photography. I'm here with Ronald, a Melbourne-based photographer who frequently travels the world for weddings, often to exotic places. Eric runs Akademe, a cross-educational platform workshop, along with Julia Archibald, another Melbourne photographer. And in 2017 and 18, Eric won the AIPP, Australian Institute of Professional Photography, Australian Album of the Year. Welcome. How are you?
Yay, very good, thank you. What a lovely introduction.
Fully deserved. Let's start with the simple stuff. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your
Yeah,
background as a
sure.
photographer?
So my name's Eric. I'm a wedding photographer. I am very passionate about what I do. I absolutely love it. And it's taken me to some really amazing places, and I've got to work with some amazing people. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for it. It's always interesting hearing anyone's story about how they get into wedding photography, but so few people just go through high school and go, oh, I'm going to be a wedding photographer, just like someone else might go, oh, I want to be a builder or whatever. It kind of almost has a way of finding you rather than you finding it, I think. And for me and my path, it's been really interesting with my background in kind of filmmaking. That's kind of what I thought I wanted to do, and kind of got into filmmaking and really loved it and really enjoyed this foundation in cinematography and things like that. But also we might talk about this in a bit more detail, who knows, but also worked in TV for a while. And when you do your time in the trenches working quite hard as I did in TV, you get this wonderful appreciation for what we do now, and it kind of puts it in perspective when you have the bad days or you're swamped, or obviously it's an up and down kind of profession. So it's always nice to look back and go, oh, it's just we're so lucky to do this and to be our own boss and be in charge of our own destiny. So I'm very grateful and just absolutely I love what I do, and to feel like I'm a one-man band is something that I really value. Compared to being on a film crew, I found it just didn't work for my personality. Not that I'm not a team player, because I definitely am. But creatively, it was all about watered down ideas and battling egos and things like that, which just didn't work for me. So anyway, I love what I do.
Okay. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work in cinematography and then TV?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So I guess just to lead into that, I grew up down in Warrnambool, which is southwest Victoria, a bit of a country town. And I guess I felt pretty isolated down there. It was all about footy and fighting up Commodores, and that just kind of wasn't my jam. So I guess my window to the big wide world was movies. And so I really got into watching a lot of movies, but very quickly jumped into really dissecting them and realized I took a lot of interest in how they look, how it was lit, the style, the technique behind it. And it kind of led me down this path of getting quite obsessed about it. I was working at Woolies and stacking shelves, and I think I was spending every cent that I was earning on buying, I think of their website, it was like pre-Amazon. I think it was like through CD Now or something, buying all these books and whatever about cinematography, and I just I really was just trying to really fill my brain in the latter years of high school with just this all things cinematography, I guess. And of course from there I wanted to go off and study filmmaking, so I did that, and basically this course was essentially a tape course, and we made short films like over and over again non-stop, whether you'd make your own film or work on someone else's, and I did that for a couple of years, and absolutely loved that. You learn so much about filmmaking and just telling a story in a film by just doing it over and over and over again. And so I really loved that process. From there, I kind of went out to do my own thing and had some cool opportunities, like did some really big 35mm music videos and stuff like that for Village Roadshow, and as well as corporate stuff, short films and things like that. The problem was that I got to this point where it's like I'm going down this path of becoming a cinematographer, and I'm realizing the more and more that I do it that there's some things that I absolutely adore about it, and then other aspects I found quite creatively frustrating, where I couldn't. It was hard to execute my vision like on set, for a whole range of reasons. And I guess I kind of got to the point where I'm like, this is kind of close but no cigar. It's kind of, there's some things that are so right about it, but my gut feeling is that this isn't the path for me.
Yeah.
Which was which I really freaked out about it, actually, because it was like I dedicated so much of my time and energy into it, and then kind of really getting to a point where like this isn't what I'm meant to do with my life, kind of thing. And so I basically sold my soul, and I had an opportunity in television. So it was like as a kind of work experience on Blue Heelers, that old Channel 7 cop show. South Australia. And yeah, so from there, I basically just, I guess I saw it as a path where there wasn't any other path that was really presenting itself. So I just went for it gung-ho. And basically that set me down this stream in television. So from there, I still did a few little projects, filmmaking on the side. I didn't completely burn that, but essentially, yeah, from there, I started my career in television, which I did for about 8 years. So I did a fair time doing that. And in quickly moving up the ranks, I found myself as a technical director in studio television. So I was doing shows like Deal or No Deal and Dancing with the Stars and stuff like that, and just, churning out those studio shows, which, as terrible as these shows are, I actually really did love it, in the sense of, it was a controlled environment, and you could be creative in these weird television parameters, I guess.
Yeah.
And as a technical director, as the name would suggest, it was highly technical. So you basically ensure that all the equipment and the studio is set up to facilitate those particular requirements for the show.
Yeah.
Of course, like Dance with the Stars, that was live to air, so that's an extra layer of pressure to make sure we're staying on air. But how that is kind of relevant to the context of this discussion is also, as a technical director, you oversee the camera pictures. So you've got what's called a CCU panel, a camera control panel for each camera, and you'll be monitoring those cameras in the control room. And essentially, you're tweaking knobs and dials to color balance the cameras, make sure they cut together seamlessly, and expose correctly, contrast, yada yada yada. So it was actually really beneficial to really dial my eye into technically precise images.
Yeah.
Of course, my foundation in filmmaking is more that, creative, experimental, things like that. And I guess in TV, it was quite the opposite. Things needed to be very, very precise. And I know that that's definitely played a very significant role for me in my foundation in photography, is having just this precision, that the images needed to be perfect, particularly in studio, because obviously I did the OB stuff as well, like footy and whatever, where it was a little bit more slapdash. But yeah, in the studio, things needed to be perfect. You'd chart up the cameras and you'd dial them in to look perfect. Things like skin tones, all that kind of stuff was of paramount importance.
Yeah. So
yeah, kind of those were these kind of two foundational kind of pillars for me. Is my time in filmmaking and time in TV, and then from there that kind of led into wedding photography, which, if you want, I can talk about how that came about, or we can go on to some other stuff. Up to you.
Well, I mean, what was the progression? What was the leap?
So the leap was, I kind of saw, I guess I got to the point where I couldn't progress any further in this TV career, because any like the next jump up, you're kind of getting into management stuff, which just didn't interest me. And to keep doing what I was doing, I felt like I kind of had done that. It was kind of all very safe and comfortable. I was involved in rebuilding the control room there, which was a fairly archaic control room, and I kind of designed and led the team to rebuild the control room. And it kind of just felt like this parting project where it's like I've kind of done it, and now I'm I was still doing it, but my heart wasn't in it anymore.
Yeah.
But actually, what happened is I kept doing it anyway, not really seeing what else I could do. And I kind of found myself losing touch with myself. I kind of got a bit cynical, a little bit kind of bit damaged, I guess, my attitude and things like that. I really felt like a bit of I was disillusioned, I guess.
Yeah.
And so then basically what happened on a personal level is my brother, over a number of years, he got diagnosed with cancer, and there was a number of years where he got progressively worse and worse, and then eventually passed away.
Sorry.
Which obviously, is a very significant life event for the whole family, including me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that I could say about that, but again, in the context of this conversation, what it meant for me personally was essentially just a bit of a slap across the face going, life's short. If you're not happy, no one else is going to do anything about it except you. So I kind of went through a mental shift where it's like, all right, I'm going to take the reins, and I'm going to just, rather than just focusing on a career, I'm going to just live the life that I want. Because really, like, I didn't, like a lot of other people were partying and traveling in their early 20s. I was just kind of on this like career mindset.
Yeah.
And it really meant that I didn't live much. And to this day, kind of almost regret it a little bit. But anyway, no regrets though. I mean, that's the path that I went on. But so anyway, from there, I decided to basically quit my job and travel the world for basically a year. So going to all kinds of weird and wonderful places through the Middle East, through South America, Asia. And it was on that trip that I guess I was able to grieve on a personal level, but also just live. I had literally just felt like for years before that, I just had my blinders on. And so to be able to just be present, reconnect with myself, and in doing that and just observing the beauty of the world and cultures and people and landscape, I just inadvertently, I mean, I brought a camera, pardon me. I brought a camera with me, not really knowing how often I'd pick it up or use it. And it turned out to be this really lovely therapeutic way of going through this process that I was going through personally, was taking pictures of, for no purpose for career or any of that stuff. It was just taking pictures because I felt like I wanted to. And so I did. And I think all of a sudden I realized that I just had this really powerful tool in my hand to express myself. That sounded like something dirty there. Powerful tool in my hand.
I'm not cutting that out.
Oh, really? So all this frustrations of making a film and having this film crew and all the complexities and complications of that, I essentially had a film crew in my hand. And all it was kind of just like penny drops. It was just like, this is awesome. This is exciting. I don't, it's just a direct connection between my mind and the camera and making pictures. And it just kind of bypassed all the other stuff. So yeah, I photographed a lot on this trip, and I, in doing so, realized that I loved it, realized that I had a style that kind of was heavily influenced by my cinematography. And really coming home, I knew that this is what I need to do. How, I had no idea. And it was really quite funny looking back at it. It was like getting calendars printed on the iPhoto store and selling them to whoever would buy one, you know.
Yeah.
I think we've been there in that form somewhere or another. And then from there, basically, like a lot of wedding photographers, a friend asked me to shoot their wedding. And initially I'm like, nah, no way. Wedding photography is lame-o, not interested. And luckily he was a pretty creative guy himself. And he said, no, like, how I've seen your photos, love them. Just do what you did for me. and that was kind of another penny drop kind of moment. And so I shot this mate's wedding, and it was just this stars aligning moment, like, oh, and it was like, okay, this is it. So I had a motorbike at the time, sold that, and basically just kitted myself out, and just was, like I've always been in life, this real single track. It was like once I set my mind on something, I'd make it happen. And yeah, so it was I was working in TV, picking up bits and pieces of work, and then like sneaking out to meet couples, and it was quite funny, some of the stories that came out of that time. But
So,
yeah, it was a very difficult year, that transition, but yeah, it was pretty awesome, like handing in that resignation, that's for sure.
yeah. So what was the point where you decided, okay, I can resign now? A certain number booked, or?
Basically, yeah, like I kind of I got to a point where there was probably about a year where I was starting to book weddings like a year out. And I think it was around like the month of December where I got myself in a situation where I just had to quit by December because I was just so heavily committed with work.
Yeah.
And I could kind of delay that too long because obviously shooting on weekends, I could actually work during the week and then shoot on the weekend, which is insane because there's obviously no time to do all the other stuff. So I kind of left it way too late because obviously it's scary to make that final jump. But yeah, I did, and it was just a wonderful feeling. And from there, I started shooting weddings, and humble beginnings, and doing the hard slog, and yeah, just kind of, I think like a lot of people shooting, very quickly I got quite high numbers, and shooting around 50 weddings a year. And I was able to just sustain that for maybe a couple of years.
Was this all in Melbourne?
Yeah, initially it was in Melbourne and kind of country Victoria.
Yeah.
And yeah, had a few good opportunities along the way that really kind of fast forwarded my progression a bit. There was one wedding in particular, which was, at the time, it was basically like the ultimate hipster Melbourne wedding at a time where no one had really seen that, which of course that's all we see now.
Yeah. Okay.
And it really went mental online.
Yeah.
And that really, from there, it just the stats on my website went crazy, and tons of inquiries, and everyone knew this wedding.
Yeah.
So that was a really good kind of, yeah, I probably fast forwarded like a couple of years just from that wedding alone. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering how your the background in cinematography particularly has kind of influenced how you shoot a wedding. Do you think it has sort of set an approach for you?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think initially I just was taking photos at weddings and just kind of did it. But I was inadvertently really leaning heavily on that background in cinematography. And now that the longer I've been shooting, the more I make a conscious effort to really kind of refer back to that. And so to answer your question, like, yes, in epic proportions. Like, I guess the way I look at photographing a wedding day is like shooting a storyboard for a movie, in the sense of not only, I mean, in individual frames, often photographers might describe work as cinematic, and it's, that it's a fairly ambiguous term, but I guess it's a vibe of a dramatic image, I guess. So yeah, in individual frames, I'm very interested in playing with light. Very much love low-key lighting, like a directional light to play with, which creates beautiful, quiet, simple images that have a lot of impact generally. But so there's a lot you can talk about there in the individual frames, but I think that this kind of goes down a bit of a tangent, which is quite interesting because so like photography in general is so geared towards individual frames. So if you're looking in a newspaper or a magazine, it's all about individual shots. Even a like an artist, having an exhibition, they might have a theme of images, but it's not necessarily a sequential set of images that follows from one to the next.
Mm.
Um, so it's really quite interesting in wedding photography because it's one of the few, and in fact probably the only one that I can think of that that is not only just about individual frames. It's because such a momentous day. There's so much happening. There's so much that we need to document and record. It's all about capturing the day in its entirety, not just a couple of good shots.
Yeah.
And this is where it is actually quite a unique genre of photography for that reason, and it's quite well suited to bring in these principles of cinematography, in the sense of not only taking beautiful pictures, but considering how each picture flows from one to the next, and how each scene will look from one to the next, and then it gets along it leads down the path of creating an engaging story. So like, if you didn't consider these kind of things at all, you may well shoot a wedding day on exactly the same lens and the exact same framing and color and light. And pardon me. And if you think of it in terms of a graph, you're kind of flatlining. And if you look at it in terms of an engaging story, that would be kind of boring, if you like. Like if you're watching a Netflix show and every single shot looked the same, you're not creating dynamic and diversity and mood and intensity and peaks and troughs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really interested in thinking about how each scene will look and creating that dynamics which creates an engaging story and a beautiful story. It makes the quiet moments quieter and the loud moments louder. It creates emotion and feeling, and it goes far beyond just those individual frames. So I rely on that heavily. So, and a simple example, because I guess it's talking in really general terms, is just often with getting ready shots, it can be a dirty hotel room, it can be chaotic, there can be people everywhere, and I really try and control that and rein it in. There's plenty of opportunity in other parts of the day to capture. There's better times of the day to focus my energy on capturing the guests and family members. Of course, they'll play a role in the getting ready shots, but I really try and just strip away the chaos and really create a mood and create quietness, which can be really beneficial for the bride, particularly when she might be a bit stressed and kind of need a little bit of peace and quiet then too. So it's a matter of just really, I'm very much interested in creating a unique, what am I trying to say here? Playing around with the lighting essentially, and creating a quietness and creating a mood that is peaceful and quiet, almost like the calm before the storm, if you like.
Yeah.
And so creating those kind of really quiet, dramatic images, during the makeup and hair, and then eventually when she's putting a dress on and things like that, is kind of almost, if you think of it in terms of a graph, is like the really bottom, quiet, peaceful kind of moment. And then if you jump to the next scene, if you like, it's her walking down the aisle, and then you get to go to the exact opposite part of this kind of graph, if you like. And so that's the exact opposite. It's bright and colourful and beautiful, and it creates this dynamic that makes both of those beautiful because they sit next to each other, and more powerful. So when the bride's walking down the aisle, bride and groom's walking down the aisle, and they're having hugs with their family, and there's tears rolling down their cheek, that's made all the more beautiful that there was this scene before that was so quiet and peaceful. So you're kind of creating this dynamic, which even for people that, because ultimately we want our photos to be beautiful for anyone to look at, not just the couple themselves or their family. I want to create stories that anyone would want to look at. And so it is important to consider the idea of creating an engaging story that's, beautiful and powerful. And I think, yes, I'm very interested in doing that and leaning on cinematography to kind of see how they do it and kind of bring that into what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you? I can understand this idea of having a story play out in the series of photos that you provide across the day, but how do you maintain creativity? Not just in terms of an individual frame, but in terms of this bigger picture, this bigger sort of story that you're telling.
I think it's. I guess it's each individual frame is a building block, and so it's a matter of very finely tuning your vision to not only pre-visualizing the shot itself, but pre-visualizing how it will fit into the story. So if you're shooting, if you're telling a story that's in a certain location, creating shots that will communicate, like I guess I'm just thinking of things like landscape shots and stuff like that. I really try and create not just a photo of the location, but actually applying creativity to going, all right, well, I'm going to show off this location. How can I do that in a creative way that kind of then becomes a building block into this bigger story? So I guess it's essentially just light, isn't it? Really, like just as far as looking at finding interesting light and playing with it, and then letting that lead into a style and a voice that flows through the story. I guess that maybe didn't come out right, but anyway,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, that does make sense. Yeah, yeah. How much someone I interviewed recently was talking about play and how much she creates her new sort of how creative she is. She's just constantly playing with light and with the camera as well. Is that part of your approach?
Absolutely. I think that it's always, my biggest fear is capturing boring images. I always want the photography to be king. And in doing that, it's always looking for elements to play with. So it could be a technique in camera. It could be a new toy, a new gadget, a new light or something like that. But the common thread for me is always playing with light wherever possible. And obviously the possibilities are infinite with what we can do with light. And, I know the more it almost becomes, well, in part of that play, it becomes practice, and then you can stumble across something and then add it to your arsenal.
Yeah.
And so, this idea of, playing with light almost sounds like one of those cliche kind of expressions, but it's kind of all I do, really. And in doing that play, I think that you could I guess play leads to, I'm very precise with kind of what kind of light I select to use. And it's through that play that you then go, all right, like, yes, there's times, particularly in a portrait session, is a good time to just kind of put them in some interesting light and then walk around them and see what you can create. But there's also other parts where it's like, I've done the play on a different day, and now it's like this situation leads me to do this exact thing with the light so it's kind of, yes, there's that play, but also it leads to adding things to your toolkit which you can draw on when you need them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Now I know you speak with younger photographers, and I'm wondering what mistakes you see people making, and particularly around creativity, I think.
Well, I think that it's I see a lot of mistakes, and I think the mistake is not putting. I mean, yeah, there's so many aspects to this question actually, which I think it's people not caring enough about their photography. I think that wedding photography, a lot of people get into it for different reasons, and it's really geared towards, or it lends itself to people wanting to make a business out of their photography, which is wonderful and something that I really enjoy myself. But the mistake that I think people can make as photographers or as wedding photographers is not putting enough importance on their images. There can be like it's a very common business thing to go, what's your goal? And often it's a number of weddings or an amount of like a income,
Yeah.
or something like that. And so rarely is it like a creative goal, like I want to make beautiful images. And so I think that that's one part of it, is just the priority that people put on their actual photography. Then the other aspect of it is the source of inspiration that photographers provide themselves. Anything you put in front of your eyeballs is fueling your creativity. And if all you ever look at is Instagram, and if all you ever look at is wedding photography on Instagram, that's the only thing that's going to fuel your creativity. And so I think that's a huge mistake that people make, is that, oh, I'm a wedding photographer and I want to try something different this weekend, so I'm going to look at what other wedding photographers do to give me some ideas. And I think it results, generally speaking, in a really stifled creativity in wedding photography in general, in my opinion. Because, photography, the opportunities are limitless. Like, and if you look outside of wedding photography, there is some truly remarkable stuff being created by photographers around the world, like right now. And there is so much inspiration that we can all draw from these other genres. And I think a very common mistake is that wedding photographers aren't looking outside their bubble for inspiration. I really like to look. I really like to make a point of not looking at too much wedding photography. I'm always interested, of course. I don't go as far as erasing it from my field of view, but I really make a point of fueling my creativity elsewhere. Of course, with my interest in cinematography, film plays a big part of that, but also, Renaissance paintings I just adore. Rembrandt I could just look at forever, over and over again. As well as some of the other great painters as well. It is relevant to what we do when you're looking at how these amazing artists just so finely tuned and perfected natural light. These guys were using window light.
Yeah.
And we can do exactly that today. Creative inspiration outside of wedding photography is, I think, extremely important. And also, I think, in that is just the danger of Instagram in general. We've gone from, looking at images on big screens and big prints and big albums. And now, the photography that most of us look at is in this tiny little square. And I think often, I said earlier in this chat, I want photography to be king. Photography really can't be king on Instagram. If you look at some of the greatest photographers on the planet right now, they might have 380 followers. There isn't necessarily it's not necessarily a good home for great photography. Inevitably, it has to be. It is the home of photography right now, but it's not necessarily the safest place for our art. And as we all know, what wins on Instagram, or what gets the highest numbers, is not necessarily the photography, it's the content of the photo, whether it's a beautiful model, or, a Purcell backpack, or, in the wedding context, a boho dress, or, tattooed couple. These aren't bad things. Of course, they can be extremely beautiful, but photography can get lost in that. And yeah, and then I guess also leading on from there is just trends with like editing. You see so obviously that photographers are just looking at the color palette of other wedding photographers and going, "Oh, I want to do that too," and putting this huge emphasis on presets, which I think again, photography gets lost in that. If you've got this, extremely orange, muddy preset that looks cool at the moment, how you like you're almost crippling yourself with what you can do with light and the photos, the kind of images that you can take on the wedding day. So yeah, I think there's some of the mistakes that people make. I think, uh, yeah, for me, I guess it's like letting photography and light to be king, and the longer I'm shooting, the less and less my presets actually do. Like they're almost non-existent. Editing with light is going to create the best images in my opinion. So yeah.
Now, I know you do a lot of destination weddings, and I'm wondering, how do you find them? Do you enjoy doing them? Do you see yourself continuing to do them?
Yeah,
You've got a young family, is that right?
yeah, so I've got a son. I share him with his mum,
Yeah,
so that kind of allows me that freedom that I need
yeah,
to head overseas.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, the answer is like I absolutely adore my destination stuff. I can certainly feel the travel fatigue if I do too many of them, but I try and really just take on a handful of projects evenly spread throughout the year, or at least that's the ideal case. Doesn't always work out that way. There could be two really close together and yada, yada, yada. But
Yeah.
the goal is to have, a handful spread throughout the year. And I'm fortunate to get paid appropriately for them. But it's even so is so like it's a passion project. You couldn't possibly. It's really hard to. I think people would be amazed how much time I invest in my destination stuff, as far as pre-production research, pre-visualizing how it's all going to come together, pre-shoots or pre-shoot or shoots before the wedding day, location scouting, location shots that might be kind of landscape shots that I put into the wedding day coverage that I haven't actually taken on the wedding day. Then there's the wedding day itself, which I do try and meticulously plan out. It really it kind of calmed my anxiety a bit, just knowing that there's a game plan and how things are going to run. And of course, it often goes out the window, but having a good game plan is a good starting point.
Yeah.
And then after the wedding is just a really meticulous edit. I am a perfectionist, and I think with these projects, again, it kind of transcends the money transaction. I really just want to create a beautiful story for my couple, and often that can mean some very late nights, really obsessing over, what's probably at least 1,000 images that I deliver on something like that. So there is, in my mind, there's like a month of my life, but particularly a wedding like Kenya that I did in January, for example. That was really, I put my heart and soul into it before, during, and after.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do that because I love it, not for any other reason, I guess. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I absolutely love it. I see. I guess I try and bring what am I trying to say here? I learn a lot through doing those destination weddings because I get a lot of inspiration from these faraway places, cultures, and it's such a unique story that's exciting. Shooting weddings for many years, as you know, it can start to feel the same. And it's almost like you kind of want to feel something new. And with these destination weddings, they provide a source for that. So it's like you're rediscovering being a wedding photographer each time over and over again.
Yeah.
And And so in doing that, it's exciting, but also you can learn a lot through, you know, really harnessing that inspiration that you get in those places. You can often really learn a lot of really important lessons and stumble across techniques and ideas that you can then bring home to, you know, the weddings on home turf in Melbourne. You know, could be, you know, 500 meters down the road. So they kind of both. Yes, I go to these amazing places, but I don't do it all the time, and it kind of really, they complement each other well, I guess. You know, these weddings that I do on home turf, I really lean on those kind of lessons that I've learnt on those destination weddings as well.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think the sort of boost of newness and the feelings of this being new again sort of sustains you?
Absolutely, 100% yes. I think without that, I might struggle to find new ideas and inspiration to apply. So yeah, these destination weddings do play an important role in sustaining me and my creativity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. How do you find them? Is it people find you, or do you go out and sort of hunt?
It's a mixture. Yeah, I'm a terrible business person. I really they have ways of finding me. Very rarely am I finding them. I don't think I'd ever find them. So it could be them, you know, finding me online, the usual kind of avenues. There's certainly no kind of no tricks or anything. It's probably just trying to, I guess, you know, referring to what I said earlier, I'm a terrible business person and I always want my photography to do the work for me. And that's kind of my business model, which isn't necessarily perfect and isn't necessarily smart, but that's what I do. I focus all my energy on taking the best pictures I can and let those pictures do the work for me. And I think that applies to my marketing technique, which is basically nothing. But, you know, hoping that my pictures will find their way to couples that connect with those images and want me to capture their day. So yeah, that's essentially how it comes about in one way or another. Sometimes it might be a referral from other photographers as well, mates, or, you know, someone on the other side of the world that I've met, or just, you know, likes my work or something like that. So it's always different, but like I say, pretty lazy approach.
What do you think are the biggest challenges working as a wedding photographer at the moment?
Well, it's certainly, we all know it's there's more people doing it than ever before. Sorry, got a little pop up here. I'm going to close that. Yeah, there's more people doing it than ever before. Technology's really meant that anyone can get into it, which is, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's fantastic. So in having that really saturated market, of course, that's going to drive the price down from a business point of view. But also there's just the simple fact of getting bookings. And that's something that affects everyone, even people that have been shooting for a long time, have huge names for themselves. Everyone's noticing, and, you know, some big changes recently or in the last year or two. So my personal solution to that, and I think is important for every photographer to consider, is how are you standing out from the crowd? Again, if you're referring to Instagram for your creative inspiration and you're essentially reproducing what you see on there, is that really going to lead to you standing out from the crowd? Of course it isn't. So I guess this, you know, creative journey that I'm on with wedding photography, it just inspires me even more to go down that path of creating unique images, having a unique style and approach, and hopefully stop people in their tracks and go, oh, this is different. I haven't seen this before. And then to dig a little deeper and hopefully see a beautiful story that's emotional and moving and is a artistic record of a couple's story. So yeah, I think for all wedding photographers, I think it's finding your way of standing out from the crowd. And yeah, you see photographers that have a very, very different approach. It could be standing out from the crowd by, portrait session, doing army roles and interpretive dance.
Yeah.
I certainly don't do that, but that is a way of being different, and good luck to those people. Love you, Johnny. And like it's so there's so many different ways of doing that. But yeah, I think being photographers, our photography is important, and so finding a way for your photos to speak louder than everyone else's is surely a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So your approach is around having not just the story, but also the individual imagery be as perfecting that imagery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that kind of leads into light. I'm very much interested in playing with light and composition and, creating those dramatic images. Hopefully, combining that with some lovely emotion and connection with the couple. But yeah, it's kind of, I guess, how I try and create those impactful images is light play, it's landscape, it's story and connection.
Yeah.
But it kind of those possibilities are endless, aren't they, as far as what could lead to those images that really stand on their own 2 feet or whatever. But yeah, there's also before I was doing a lot of destination stuff and I was feeling kind of creatively flat, just doing Melbourne weddings over and over again. I'd really force myself to be creative, and I'd make myself accountable. So like on my notes for the wedding day, I might just write down an idea that I haven't tried. And it could be something that might even be a bit lame. Like there was a time where I wanted to muck around with HDR, like that you see in those landscape magazines in the newsagents, which often looks so overbaked. But it's like, I should give this a try, more dynamic range, like painterly look. Why not? So I mucked around with that in Melbourne a few times, and then it turned out to be really handy to draw on that technique when I was in New Zealand on a mountaintop and photographed this very iconic spot that's been photographed a million times over. And it happened to really stand out as, and it went viral and all this stuff, all because of just forced myself to be creative back in Melbourne, mucking around with some different techniques. And I think that, I think that was really important I think it's a good tip for anyone that is interested in being, more creative and really refining their style and their craft, is to really it could just be as simple as just having one thing on every wedding day that you try that you haven't tried before. And it's amazing how you can start to get excited about it. Like it could just be something like taking using a really slow shutter speed, just mucking around with the slow shutter speed, but you've written it down and you have to. And then all of a sudden it's kind of in the back of your mind almost the whole day, like, I wonder how I could use it here, or I wonder how I could use it there. And then it's like, okay, here's the moment, here's what I'm going to do. And you can really stumble across some really beautiful stuff by really forcing yourself to do that. Could be an out of focus shot. Could be mucking around with, off camera flash, stuff that might scare you, that you think, I wouldn't possibly know how to do that. It's amazing with off camera flash how terrified people are of it when it's so incredibly simple. But you kind of, there's mental barriers of like, that's fancy, I wouldn't be able to do that. So yeah, I think that was a good way of just forcing that creativity. Also in doing that, you could, like there was one shot where I basically set up a little photo booth in the corner of the reception and did a headshot of every single guest at the wedding, and then composited them together.
Yeah, I saw that. I love that photo. It's great.
Thank you. And I mean, that was essentially just doing that very thing. That particular shot, it was one of those things where I was going to do it. Like, I think I literally wrote it on my notes for a wedding that I had the day after. And then the more I thought of it, it's like, oh, actually, I need to think about this a bit more, and I need to put a bit of preparation into how this is going to work, which I did. So I did a little bit more pre-production than I usually would. But it came from that very thing. It was where I took that photo was a venue that I'd shot at many times before, where I've been there before in the evening in reception, kind of just cruising on autopilot. And instead made something that really made me feel good, that was exciting and different, you know, it got a good response. It's something different. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself if you were starting out in wedding photography?
That's a good question. I mean, a few things come to mind. I think that maybe sidestepping your question a little bit is that people need to have patience. And I think that people look at whether it's myself or they look at someone else and go, oh man, they're doing these amazing destination weddings. Like, how can I do that? Well, you know, I shot literally hundreds of weddings in Melbourne for peanuts before I had an opportunity to shoot overseas. And I worked incredibly hard on refining my craft, developing my style, and, you know, taking pictures that couples wanted. And there is no fast track to doing that. When I say that, you know, you see people where they, you know, a bit of creative thinking and maybe you can fast track it, but certainly that wasn't the path for me. And I think that generally it requires hard work and perseverance and patience. And I do see people lacking that, kind of just come in guns blazing and shoot a handful of weddings, and then it's like, right, now I'm going to, you know, book a bunch of weddings in Tuscany. And, you know, you might be able to make that happen, and good luck to them. But I think generally speaking, there's a lot to be said for having patience. Yeah, but what I would say to myself, I think, is a little bit of that. Be patient and just keep your head down and keep focusing on what you're doing. What else? I think, you know, it's a never-ending journey, but, you know, I don't know if you've read this book called The Power of Now, by Eckhart Tolle. It's a bit of a self-help spiritual kind of thing. And it just talks about, essentially, like, the meaning of life is the present moment, and really just kind of these Buddhist philosophies. But within this, they talk about the inner journey and the outer journey. And, you know, the outer journey is the stuff that means nothing. It's how many followers you've got on Instagram. It's your bank balance. It's what awards you've won. You know, these things mean nothing. When you're on your deathbed, you're not going to be reminiscing about, you know, these things. The inner journey is something more beautiful and way more important. And the inner journey is more along the lines of your own personal life. You know, I have a son, and he's so, yes, you know, my universe and where my heart is. I've also got two parents that I love, and I've got a partner, Katie, that I love very much, and that's what's important in this inner journey. And also, what falls under that category of the inner journey is the beauty of what I get to do, and that's capturing a couple's most special day. And you know, in my life, I've lost my brother. You know, the beauty of life isn't lost on me, and how fleeting and how precious it can be. And documenting this beautiful day is something that I can put my heart into. And in photographing a couple's wedding day, I almost feel like I'm giving them a part of myself. I'm getting a bit emotional now, actually. giving them a piece of myself, and with a sincere hope that not only have I documented their day, but I've made it something special and something beautiful, that will take their breath away. And I mean, that's the sorry, I'm getting real choked up. That's the inner journey, and that's something beautiful, and that's where I think we should all focus our attention on.
Yeah.
Not the other shit that means nothing.
Yeah.
And so to bring it back to your question,
Yeah.
I think I would say not only to myself when I started, when I'd shot weddings for 1, 2, or 3 years, I still need to tell it to myself now, that this stuff doesn't mean anything. We all know that social media can be frustrating. There's things like algorithms that can really shaft us and affect our business and all this stuff. But it's like, who cares, man? We're so lucky to do what we do. And there is a beautiful transaction where we're being paid good money to make art for beautiful people. That's what it's about, and that's what we should focus on. So, yeah, hopefully that I got to your answer eventually.
Yeah, you did. Look, I'm kind of interested. What was it just before when you were getting a bit emotional? What was it that was sort of triggering that?
I'm an emotional person, and I guess I really care about what I do very, very much. Like it's part of who I am, and it's part of my identity, and it's I remember having this conversation with this guy at a pub one night. He used the word symbiotic, and this word really stuck with me. And I had no idea what it meant when he told me about it. And it's essentially an equal giving and receiving in a transaction. And I feel like, just as I give the couple a piece of myself, I get something really beautiful back in return. And it's something that I hold very, very dear. These experiences that I have documenting these stories are things that I really cherish.
Yeah.
Particularly on destination weddings, not because it's a destination wedding, but because I inevitably spend a lot of time with the couple. You really get catapulted into a couple's life. You spend more time with them than anyone else on their wedding. And you have these, it's not even about the photography. It's a beautiful human experience. And I really hold them dear. I'm a bit of a quirky, unusual guy, and I struggle sometimes with, human relationships. I'm not necessarily the best friend or the best son or the best dad, but I certainly try. But there's something about what I do that really just makes sense to me and feels right, and there's something really beautiful in that I really cherish, that does make me emotional and very thankful as well. And the other thing is that I kind of glossed over this transition into wedding photography, and I might get a bit emotional again, but that's all part of it, and so doesn't need to get awkward. But like my brother Lee, when it was literally the day that he died, the last thing he said to me was, "Don't waste a day." And that was something that I basically had a year to process as I, traveled around the world and things like that, and certainly inspired me to go overseas in the first place. But I mean, I was so cynical at the time and damaged and obviously upset and kind of battling with his illness as well. But I felt very much a victim of what life was doing to me. And Lee really, not only in what he said to me, but his life and his example was, collectively really inspired me to go down the path of what I do now. And so, I wish he could know, what I've done because of him. And, I remember literally taking photos of a couple at at the pyramids, and just like losing my shit. How amazing it is, and being in this exotic place that growing up in Southwest Victoria, I never in a million years did I think I would be there.
Yeah.
And to just have that little moment of going like, like I did that because of like what
he said to
what
you.
he's given me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like I obviously it's evident in this conversation that I'm very passionate about what I do and very thankful to be doing what I do.
Yeah.
And it's essentially so much to do with him.
Yeah.
So that obviously makes me very emotional as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it sounds like you are doing what he said to you. It sounds like you're not wasting any days. You do create some beautiful work. So
yeah, thank you. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's crazy to think. Yeah, just like the life that's happened after him, and yeah, what he's kind of helped me kind of find through his wisdom. So yeah.
Yeah. Eric, thank you. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing those thoughts and feelings with us. I do appreciate it.
No worries. My absolute pleasure.
All right. Take care.